I'm Kim Irvine. I'm the executive creative director for the Imagineering team that stays local down here. I've been working on Disneyland for about 35 years now. My mentor, John Hench, was kind of Walt's right-hand man. I didn't know Walt myself directly. My mom did, Leota to his time. She was never Leota. But John worked with him as a background artist and then as one of the directors of Thread, which was Walter Disney when it first opened and Imagineering now. And John was my mentor for many, many years and would come down to Disneyland at least once a month and we would walk with her. And he would talk to me about all of the different things at Disneyland, why they're there, where they came from, what Walt's feelings were about them. Kind of the history of Disneyland was constantly being told to me as we would walk through the park. So some of the things I'm going to share with you are really from the mouth of John because of his being with Walt when they actually created the park. I know when Walt was creating the Disneyland, he cared so much about the people. He constantly talked to his Imagineers about go down to Disneyland and see how people are interacting with that park, see what they like, see where they go, see where they eat. Constantly pay attention to what they want because he cared deeply about his guests. He really did. He built this place for them. And he would tell his Imagineers often how much he loved people. The people were good and people were kind and we needed to do the very best for them. And I think he felt very much the same when he was doing his animated features. He wanted to put things out there that would inspire people and make people feel good, right? Especially the princesses. And then they're talking about everything from Snow White through to the last film that he worked on. He always had kind of the same message through them, that good, kind, gentle people always won out over evil, even if the evil was more powerful, had more strength than features that seemed like they could overpower kindness. The kindness always won out. So those are the kind of things that we try to also portray in the attractions that we put at Disneyland having to do with thinking. So one of the first things we're going to look at was the Snow White Grotto. We took John down to look at him, and John basically said, here, you got to figure out how to put these in my pot somewhere. Do whatever you need to do with it. And John said, well, it's going to be a little strange because Snow White. Yeah. How could that? Yeah. So the effect is going to look funny. That's what I was trying to do to get it funny. So John worked up a little arm and noticed the walk and went. Looks like a cemetery house. Something different. So then John remembered just there at the end of it, it's just a died. And he thought, if I said, that's the press room, the white of pie, and then whatever the water slide has a water slide, you can widen it as a place down, and you can go up to the gate and realize all the piano at the point. That will force a professor and possibly have that little deer hole with the birthday scale. Then, this Rob said, I love these. People are going to want to throw water into that body of water and then throw coins into that body of water. So let's do a little ritual where the kids can throw the money and then the kids are going to want to climb down and get to it. So we need to put a little screen down there so they can't get down in there. And then we'll donate that money to the children's hospitals and the different children's charities. So one of the first things that Walt had Herbie Ryman put on the rendering of Disneyland was the cast. He wanted that to be what he would call the wing, and that was Walt's word for something that would pull you towards it. And each land has one, but the castle is the one that pulls you down Main Street to see, this gorgeous thing. Herbie Ryman did a beautiful rendering of it. And then they built a model, and what was interesting was the back of the castle, that top piece, was actually on the front. And when Walt was looking at the model, which was in pieces, he turned it around and said, I like it this way better. So when you look at the bathroom castle, remember that originally, when you see for these renderings, that would be the front. Um, our castle is the smallest of all the castles. You've probably seen they just keep getting larger and larger as we continue to build parks. But we especially like its size. We've tried a couple of times to look at how we might add another spire or do something to make it feel a little bit bigger. But we always decided it looked awkward and we just keep it the sweet, charming little Disneyland Sleeping Beauty castle for the kids. We changed the color schemes on the castle slightly many times. And this was just done a couple of years ago where we picked up the colors of the blue a little bit. And then in order to get some height on the castle, we did a thing that is an animator's trick called forced perspective. We did atmospheric perspective, which when things go up in the air, they get bluer because of the particles in the air. So that's why the strong pink at the bottom goes up to more of a lavender as it climbs up that tall tower. The golden tower on the right side has always been left just gold because that is a copy of the chapel on Notre Dame. And that was one of Walt's favorite structures, and he wanted to have it on this castle. So that is exactly, if you look at a facade of Notre Dame, you'll see that same exact little chapel building in it. And it was always meant to stay in just a gold and a brand. For many years, when you wanted to greet a princess, you would really find her out in the area somewhere. A lot of times, Sleeping Beauty would be in front of your castle. And by the way, I meant to add that the reason that we built Sleeping Beauty's castle is because that film had just come out when we were building Disneyland. It was very difficult for the kids to get to the princesses. Of course, they were always just surrounded by so many kids. They got very hectic for the princess herself to try and control all of what goes on there. So we decided a few years ago to build a specific area. Usually what happens here is, you wait in a short line and then you can go through and meet just you and a princess for a short moment, one at a time. There's usually 3 or 4 different princesses in there at a time. So it's very organized. And at the same time, we decided, let's create this little village. This used to be Plaza Gardens many, many years ago. And it was where we used to have the big band dancing and stuff, which was so much fun back in the 70s and 80s. But we did a kind of themed Beauty and the Beast overlaid on the old theater canopy there, and then built these little buildings all to make a village, which I think is really fun. A tribute to go. We were starting to talk about how much fun the kids like to dress up like the princesses. And merchandise was coming out with these beautiful princess dresses. And to see the little girls in the park in these dresses was just such a cool experience. So we thought, why not do a place where they can go and have their hair done and get their makeup done and just make it a really fun experience for the kids and their families. So we took out the toy shop and recreated this space that is all meant to look kind of like the interior of Cinderella's cottage, with the paintings that are on the walls and stained glass, and really dressed it up so they felt like they were the most beautiful little salon ever. And then the people that are trained how to do the hair and makeup, and they even do sparkly nails and all kinds of fun things. They just did a wonderful job of storytelling. It's like a whole experience. And then the really fun thing that we did is when you're finally finished, they turn you around and look in the mirror, and all the drapes separate, and this little sparkle goes all around the mirror, and then these beautiful flower bodies come around. It's like pixie dust, and you see yourself in the middle of this gorgeous spring. Very, very fun. Snow White was, as you know, one of the first film that Walt made. In those old fairy tales, all of our fairy tales were actually written many, many years ago, but a lot of times there were things in them that were pretty dark. And Walt and his animators, I think, and the story writers did a beautiful job of taking the story and filtering out things that were extremely scary or gruesome. If you've ever read any of those grim books or whatever, you know what I'm talking about. But Walt didn't want to take out all of the fear factor because he thought that good and evil was a good balance. You needed to have a little bad in order to celebrate the good. So being the first dark ride we did, at that time, rides were usually just found in like amusement parks and circuses. And so he really wanted to do some that were much fancier, much more upscale, and told the story of Snow White. The witch was a big part of that story, of course, and so they concentrated on her and how frightened she was as you went through the laboratory and the frightening forest, and then finally redeemed that the dwarves and Snow White's goodness won out in the end. But it was still pretty scary because you saw the witch like 5 different times, and she'd pop out at you from, inside a cottage or coming down a weird canal. And we just couldn't get kids to go on it. Even my own kids were like, no, that's too frightening, we'll go on something else. So we decided to take that same story and just twist it a little bit so that it's about the beautiful parts, the fun parts, the happy parts of Snow White with the dwarves singing and dancing, the dwarves working the beautiful jewel mine. The laboratory we still have because the witch is still part of the story, but it's actually more magical now because it shows like the cauldrons with, the big vapors coming out of it, beautiful colors and sparkly swirls coming from the different vases of liquids and such. And then the ending being that she disappears and Snow White is in this beautiful forest with all the fairy friends that she has, taken care of all this time, animal friends, and comes back from the deep sleep. So it just is the same story, but we just don't have the witch falling off a cliff and all of the things that were kind of terrifying before. And now ridership is huge, as you can see. It's not scaring kids anymore. So it was a really, really fun project to do. We actually did all of this during COVID. There was a team of us that continued to come in, and it was great because the contractors could drive right up and go in, get their tools, unlike the usual work we have to go through to work on something that's in the middle of the park. So we really celebrate this. You may remember the exterior. I do all the exterior color schemes for all of our buildings. And when this was, we have the window with the queen. So we painted it like it was her castle. So it had kind of dark gray and blue color scheme, and then the skull around the corbels. And we removed all of that and painted a much happier color scheme so it looks more inviting to come in for kids as well. With you all, I hope that I've given you some good stories. I could talk about the background of Disneyland and especially my mentors for hours, but I try to cut it short. This is where the walkthrough is, and again, this open red castle with the beautiful Islander sets inside. Anyways, have a great day. Thank you all so much for coming.
Yeah.